help me understand something. For the first time in the history of mankind, more than a few have enough to eat, have drinkable water, have shelter from the elements, and can expect to live more than what used to be the usual 25 years of age. Some of us have escaped, in the words of Thomas Hobbes, a world of no letters, no society, and which is worst of all, continual fear and the danger of violent death, and the life of man, solitary, poor, nasty, brutish, and short. Though we have so far to go to ensure all mankind reaches a level of security free from hunger, much progress has been made. One need only look back to the early 1960s and compare it with today. Before then, the huge proportion of the population in China, India, Taiwan, South Korea, Hong Kong, Singapore, and Malaysia were all in the depths of poverty. Now, just look at India. With its teeming population of the desperately poor, according to the magazine Business 2.0, there are 400 million middle-class Indians. Indians in the United States comprise the richest ethnic group we have. The old Asian tigers of Taiwan, South Korea, Hong Kong, and Singapore are relatively prosperous nations. Though it may seem hard to imagine now, there was serious doubt when Korea was divided into North and South in 1948, whether the South could survive. Most industry was in the North, and per capita income was higher in North Korea than South Korea. On the other hand, we have increased depression, anxiety, and fear about the future among those whose basic needs have been met their entire lifetime. How can this be, given this unprecedented prosperity in the world? What are its causes? How do we know it is affecting us? And what are its implications for work? And most importantly, what can we do about it? Let's refer to our basic pillars of security. Let us imagine how the world was for those who lived a few hundred years ago. Almost all were farmers or hunter-gatherers, with their families having done so for as long as any could remember. Few of them traveled more than a few miles away from their villages. What we learned to do from our fathers and mothers and toiled in the field besides them. We had little prospect of doing anything else besides this for our entire lives. We could easily expect to pass along this kind of lifestyle to our children, and they would do the same. Only 50% of children would reach the age of 5. Let's look at the characteristics of that time. They include simplicity, known dangers, cohesion of culture, cohesion of cause and effect, slow change, and small differences in age, cohesion of worldview. Because one day was pretty much the same as the next, with little expectation of their lot in life to change, and little chance that they would worry about what kind of mobile phone to buy, day-to-day life was simpler. What dangers existed were a bit better known, and could only come from a few directions. The chances of a rogue North Korean nuclear weapon affecting their day was minimal. And because technology did not change very much, nor was there much interaction between neighboring villages, there was a cohesion of cultures. Religious views, and even the view of what causes have what effects, were essentially the same as everyone else's. Gender expectations, whether more rigid in agricultural communities or more fluid in hunter-gatherer societies, were clear. These factors, in combination with the minimal age differences between the youngest and the oldest, made for a world very different from our own today. Let's talk about the speed of change we all face now. For some regions of the world, change from mankind living in collections of small villages, living the agrarian life for generations, occurred during hundreds of years and tens of generations. Significant dislocations and chaos occurred during this time, but the pace of change could be measured in decades, if not centuries, for most. However, the pace of change has accelerated so rapidly today that the transition between a farming society and a modern one appears within a single generation. We now have people using implements from the Bronze Age tilling the soil next to a mobile phone tower. Previously, the sexes worked and lived separately, and families worked together. Today, the sexes work together away from their home, with spouses having to trust their partners that nothing untoward is happening at work. This could not only be a source of tension within the relationship in many societies, including many Western ones until recently, it was a violation of religious law. The custom of allowing single females to only be with relatives was not just a Middle Eastern custom, but a European one as well. Consider this scenario, and then imagine the problems and issues that can occur when workers from different villages, all with their own concept of propriety, gender role expectations, and acceptable rules of behavior, must work together. One fundamental question to ask is whose rules should be followed, and what consequences should there be when they're not followed. Here's an example. Let's suppose a married man was having an affair with a coworker. Neither one of them is in the chain of command of the other. Both of them perform their jobs quite well, and there is no indication that the relationship affects their productivity. In an American company, this behavior would not be a company problem and might be considered an invasion of privacy should senior management cause trouble and make public accusations. Such was the case in one of our clients' companies. Upper management fired them both, and in the resulting lawsuit, the co-workers won $9 million. In another example, management in an American company might have created a hostile work environment where repeated, unwanted sexual advances towards women were common and tolerated, and complaints are either ignored or laughed at. This could easily be considered for a class action sexual harassment suit. From a different perspective, consider the same actions in several non-Western countries. In the first case, a married coworker having an affair would be subject to stoning, according to some interpretations of Sharia, the Islamic religious law. This is similar to what almost happened to Safai Hassani, a Nigerian woman sentenced to death by stoning for her infidelity. On the other hand, some work environments still exist where certain managers consider sexual activities with subordinates not sexual harassment, but a benefit of going to work. Now let's consider an international company whose personnel from North and South America, Western Europe, the Middle East, and China all must work together. What work rules should apply, and how should they be enforced? To add to this mix, consider the variety of age groups we have in today's working population, including millennium babies, Generation X, Generation Y, baby boomers, and those from the Depression era. Some of these generations who are younger may be supervising older workers. To add to this, some countries have over 70% of their population under 25 years of age, with the emotional volatility that comes with this reality. While such diversity can often increase the effectiveness of an organization, it can also be detrimental. Diversity is another way of saying that people don't have something in common with each other. As a result, such diversity can make communication difficult, and accidental hostilities can happen when those different viewpoints conflict and clash. All of these factors cause uncertainty, and with that uncertainty comes one of the major problems in the workplace: stress. To start, we will define a couple of concepts: stressors and the general adaptation syndrome. Stressors are events in the environment that potentially could cause harm or create opportunity for a person, group, or organization. If we were talking about an individual, such stressors could include pollution, violence, loss or gain of a job, divorce, a sudden increase or decrease in income. For groups, these stressors could include achieving a project milestone, gaining or losing a member, a changed mission and purpose, or a new customer. For organizations, stressors could include the offer of a private equity firm to buy out the company, the sudden gain or loss of a customer, changing CEOs. Please notice I said stressors, not stress. Stress is a potential reaction to stressors. There is not an automatic or necessarily autonomic reaction to those stressors. Now, let's talk about general adaptation syndrome, or what is usually called fight or flight. Our bodies are well adapted to dealing with immediate danger. And regardless of the source of danger, we all respond physiologically the same way. Danger is identified, adrenaline is released, and we get ready to put up our dukes or run away. Heart rate, blood pressure, and breathing all increase. We tend to think differently as well. Fine details tend to be ignored, and the most salient of perceptions are recognized. Though this reaction may have been useful in the past, it may be maladaptive or counterproductive now. One of the more peculiar facts is that our bodies produce the same gross physiological reactions, whether the change is perceived as positive or negative. If our bodies react the same way to good news and bad, we need a different way of describing our reactions to these stressors. Stressors viewed as negative by a person, group, or organization are called distressors. Stressors viewed as positive events are called eustressors. Distressors and eustressors can be broken down into two types: chronic and episodic. Chronic events are those that repeat themselves over time. Chronic distressors could be perpetual hunger, that buzzing sound the fluorescent lights make, and the child screaming next door. Episodic events are those that occur once or only occasionally. Episodic distressors could include divorce, death of a child, or a bankruptcy. Episodic eustressors include a pay raise, marriage, hopefully, and vacations. It's also important to note that the difference between eustressors and distressors is the perception of the person undergoing them. For some, bankruptcy might be viewed as a failure, another indication of low self-esteem. For others, it is an opportunity to start over, a chance to begin a new life. Which brings us to the question, what can we do about stress, or more specifically, how can we reduce distressors and increase eustressors? Whether what we wish to change, whether it be a person, a group, an organization, what can be done is in 5 categories: reframing, changing inputs, changing processes, changing goals, or removing the person or organization from its current environment. Reframing involves changing one's perspective about how a stressor might affect oneself. An example of this includes the American expression, "If life gives you lemons, make lemonade." For many companies, traditional advertising is too expensive. For example, a single-line advertisement in a news email from the Wall Street Journal costs $10,000. Print media are often more expensive than this. One conclusion a company might come to is that advertising is now unaffordable. Instead, one could reframe the question from how do we advertise in the Wall Street Journal to how do we get a story in the Wall Street Journal. They might create a blog or make a video to display on YouTube.com. So much attention might come from these actions that the journal would pick up the story. the company uses its being small and its flexibility to speedily create something which slower companies can rarely do. In addition to reframing, one can also change the inputs to the system. A person may not be able to change how their spouse behaves, nor how they change their reaction to their behavior. On the other hand, they could change the inputs to the system by divorcing the spouse. A company can fire a customer and refuse to do further business with that customer. Changing how the person or company goes about his business can also affect reactions to stressors. For an individual, yoga and meditation may help. For an organization, internal work processes, such as tools using Six Sigma, may achieve much the same thing. Even the jobs inside a company can be restructured, as I will explain in another module. Similarly, people and organizations may also choose to change their goals and objectives. They may not be able to change how well the economy is run, but they could change their expectations, either higher or lower, in what they can achieve. To accomplish these changed goals, they may need to significantly change internal work processes, as just described. Lastly, people and organizations may just leave. If the local economy is not going well, they might move to an environment that offers more opportunity. Certainly, the largest example of this is the movement of rural Chinese to the cities. Boeing Aerospace used to be quite wedded to Seattle, Washington. But because of a change in its missions and goals, senior management decided to move the company from a location where it had been from its inception to a very different environment, Chicago, Illinois. So as we can see, stress in the workplace has a variety of causes and a variety of actions that might reduce it. As we shall see in another module, organizations can act in a variety of ways to improve satisfaction, productivity, and decrease distress. In conclusion, we must all find ways to adapt to our accelerated pace of global change with new attitudes, preferences, and learning strategies that reinforce our sense of security, our faith in a brighter future, and the spirit of happiness and satisfaction with what life offers us. Thank you.